Truelove Quilts for You. Our block party, block number 5. I can't believe it's really going along. I hope you're enjoying it. I just wanted to tell you that I don't think some of you are beginners, because I'm telling you, the blocks that have been sent to me, pictures, they're so good. Last week, I think I threw everybody a bit of a curveball. A couple people said, oh, that's star block. But I'm like, I didn't mean for people to fussy cut that center square, and I've gotten images on the webpage, these beautiful, perfect points, much better than mine. Like, I don't think you're beginners. I think you're all fooling me, because you're really very good. You have beautiful color sense. So many of you, beautiful fabrics, beautiful color sense. Whatever fabrics you're using. Again, I didn't want to buttonhole you into like just fat quarters, your scraps, yardage, whatever. But the colorways are just beautiful. Two things about the web page, the whatever quilt club, you know, whatever. I'm getting there to a certain extent. A follower, Debbie Melton, her name is, has very kindly emailed me and said, I've typed up the cutting instructions for each block. Like, I'm like, oh my word, like, that's so kind. And can I put it on, if I can put it on the web page, she'll continue to do that, like in a real, like, professional manner. Because, like, you know, me, I scribbled it. I'm like, oh yes, please. So it's a matter of me getting it off my email and onto that download onto my web page. My son, I believe, helped me with the first 3 that she did. But I don't know if she's going to do each block with a photograph, with my picture and her typing instructions. So again, bear with me as far as that goes. And also another important thing is I've received, I think I've gotten most of the images of your block sent to me. Please send them to me. I was a bit rude saying don't send them, because I went back on my word, like I would like them. So it's fine. Send me your pictures of your block. I'll get to it when I get to it, to upload on my web page. But I've a couple of times, I've just gotten a phone number, and I guess somebody said, oh, somebody's texting you it, and I can't get it on my computer. So I really apologize to those people who've sent me a block and don't see it. You have to email it somehow to my truelovequiltsforyou@gmail.com. So that's those 2 things I wanted to, because I don't want anyone to feel like I'm not including them. And when you do email me with a lovely message about your block, I'm not emailing back, and I hope you appreciate it. I try to answer my comments, but my emails, I'm getting a lot of my personal emails also. But I'm acknowledging it. You're doing awesome. Really, really super. I'm really impressed with the blocks very much. Anyway, block number 5. Isn't it pretty? Not hard. Last week everyone was like, oh my goodness, that star. This isn't hard. This is a couple what are called 4 patches and a couple half square triangles. Nice, easy block. But again, 3 different fabric ways you can use. I was saying in my tutorial that I said last week, oh, we're doing 9 patches. Well, 9 patches is 9, like 3, 6, 9 units, as it were. It could be just 1 fabric, but like that one has 4 fabrics, but it's still just a 9 patch. I said, oh, the first couple blocks were 9 patches. They weren't 9 patches. I don't know, I messed up. They weren't 9 patches, but last week's star and this week's whatever is a 9 patch with some, with a couple different fabrics in the unit. Hope you love it. Oh, last week, oh yeah, last week, but look at this week. 12.5 inches. Yeah, I messed about with my machine. I had comments saying, oh, you know, you have to, when you get a new machine, you know, you have to make sure that it's, you know, your seam allowances. I'm off slightly right, just a tiny sliver. On the one side, I noticed that. But I'm like, oh, that's fine. But yeah, that is pretty good, 12.5 inches. So I'm thrilled about that, because last week's wasn't. And I didn't correct it. Somebody said, hey, you can mess about with it, which I will do. So, but try to do it, as I was saying before, the scant 1/4 inch. Somebody did mention that when you're working with so many seams, the scant 1/4 inch. Remember we were saying that last week? Just a thread or 2 smaller than the 1/4 inch seam, and you'll probably be able to more perfect your 12.5 inch raw edge block. So there's our block number 5. I hope you love it, folks. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I believe Jen is going to come next week to join us to see her progress. I'm sure you want to see her progress on her blocks, because I see her every week, and we've been talking, having a laugh about her block, about her progress, and actually a project that she started. And I think you'll be really pleased. I was thrilled about it. So she'll probably be here next week, hopefully. I have a few other things in the works. Oh, I'm doing a product review that I may have even put up, or I'll put it up next week. It's about my comic book boards. I might have already done it. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so Sunday afternoon, watch out for my block. Around 2-ish or so, I get onto my computer and I'll put up block number 5. So again, thank you very much, and have at it. All the best. 12.5 inches, block 5. Our sampler quilt is coming on. I'm thrilled. You're really doing good, folks. Thank you so much for following me and all your lovely comments. I super appreciate it. Okay, folks. Bye. I'm going to be cutting my my fabric out for my block 4, which you've already seen, and I don't know have a clue what it's going to look like yet, because this is how I started. But what I have to do is I have to cut, as you saw, I have to cut quite a few background pieces of varying sizes. So I do need different sizes, and the largest one I need is 4 7/8, and then I need 4 1/2 and a few 2 1/2. So what I'm going to do is, from my fabric here, which I've squared up, I'm going to actually cut a 5-inch piece of background fabric. You probably can just do one, and then figure out your sizes as you go along with whatever fabrics you have, whether it be fat quarters or 10-inch squares. I have a bolt of fabric, so I'm actually just going to cut a piece of my background fabric at 5 inches, because then I have to go to, and maybe I'll do it like 5 1/4, because then I can just cut from there. So this is just to get the piece that I need. So I'm cutting 5 1/4 pieces of my background fabric. Now, what I need to cut from this is, I'm just gonna, as you know how I do it, I just take off this selvage edge here. So what I need are 2 pieces of fabric, 4 7/8. Now remember, our 4 7/8 is the one line before the 5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find it on here, 4 7/8 and 4 7/8, and line it up, because I know this is straight. Line up my 4 7/8 inch there, and 4 7/8 inch down there. And I'm going to cut 2 of these 4 7/8. And here we go. One, 2. Now I need 6 2 1/2 inch squares. So actually, I know that I cut this, actually that worked out well. I cut this 5 inches, I think. So I think I can get, did I cut that 5? Yeah, so let me just see. How am I going to do this? 1, 2, I can probably do it this way. So this is doubled. However you have mastered cutting your 2 1/2, or your strips. As you see, I'm a little bit all over the place sometimes, but it works for me. So there's my 2 1/2 and my 2 1/2 down here, and I'm just going to cut it up to about there and over, and I'll use this bit here because I know this is a 2 1/2 inch strip, and mine is doubled. So I can now cut 2 1/2 inch squares out of this strip. So there's my 2 1/2 inch, and there's my 2 1/2 inch. I need 6 of these. 2, 4, 6. So there's my 6, 2.5 inches. Now I need 2 pieces of my fabric, 4.5. And I might have to cut another bit because this might not be too, I might not have enough here. I don't think I have enough. So I'll have to cut another one from my background fabric. I need 2 pieces of fabric, 4.5 inches. 2 squares. So here's my 4.5 here, and here's my 4.5 here. Oh, I might just get it. Look at that. So I'll square that up. So there's my 4.5. Am I going to do it? I am going to do it. Look at that. And there's my 4.5 right there. 4.5 and 4.5. So I've done it. So these are my background squares. And again, if you need to, put a Post-it note on each of these pieces, because this one is slightly, this is the 4 7/8, that's the 4.5. Now I'm going to start cutting my pieces for my my little 4 patches and my half square triangles. So for my half square triangles, I'm going to be using this green, as you saw, and I'm using a fat quarter for this, from my pile. And oh, I actually got a nice tip from somebody, and pardon me if I forget who it was, on my comments, to get wrinkles out really nice out of a fat quarter, or really something that's really wrinkle or creased, folded, I should say. A little bit of fabric softener in your spray bottle of water. As you know, I never put water in my iron, but I do use a tremendous amount of water in a spray bottle when I'm ironing my things and pressing my material and my pieces. And I find that if you use quite a bit of water, it actually shrinks the fabric. So when I go to wash, my fabrics don't shrink a tremendous amount because they've already been wet and then they've been ironed again. And I suppose the same could be said if you have a steam iron. But there you go. I'm going to be just squaring up, just taking off this little bit of edge here. So now I know that these 2 edges are straight. And what I'm wanting to do is I'm going to be cutting a piece. I need 2 pieces of this fabric here, 4 7/8. Again, the line before the 5 is 4 7/8. And as you know how I do it with my ruler, I use 2 rulers. I go up there, I go down there, and I'm going to be cutting 2 4 7/8. And it'll only be like 1, 2, but I'll cut the whole strip, and I can save the rest. So I'll just put this over here, my nice fat quarter, and then I'll line it up on my lines as I do. I'll just trim this edge up here to get a nice straight corner there. And then I'll get my ruler. I know this is 4 7/8. So there's my 4 7/8, and there's my 4 7/8. So I'll make a nice 2 nice pieces, 4 7/8. Oops. Oh, flipping it. There you go. So line that up. 1, 2, 4 7/8. There we go. And then, of course, I'll save that. Now, for my little 4 patch, I've done the same thing. I've pressed this fat quarter, and what we're going to be needing with this is I'll do the exact same thing. I'll just square up this one edge, just take a little tiny bit off, square that up, and then what I need here, I need 6 2.5 inch squares. So I'll just cut this piece here at 2.5 inches, right across the fat quarter. And then I'll just fold this in half as I did. Fold that in half, Can I get 2? Let me see. Let's see. Oh no, I won't, because I won't get as many. I need 6 of these, so I'm going to cut them individually. I'm just going to take off that little bit, and then I'll cut 6 2.5-inch squares. It's a little bit like when watching someone else cut is a little bit like watching paint dry. Sorry, folks. So there's 4, 5, and then 6. So these are our pieces of our block so far. Now I'm going to show you how we put it together. So the first part of our block, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting together the 3 4 patches that you saw in the block. So what we've done is we've taken our 2.5-inch squares, and I haven't laid the whole block out as I usually do, but what we're going to do is you're going to just take your 6 2.5-inch squares on this configuration. You can refer back to my block, and with your background fabric, you're going to create 3 4 patches. So lay them out, and then what you're going to do, we've done this before, you're going to stitch that seam down, and you're going to stitch that seam down, and then you're going to, whoops, oh, it's not going. Then you're going to be stitching this unit to that unit. So I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to take it over to my machine, and I'm going to be making 1, 2, 3, 4 patch in this configuration. So you can see that I've sewn together my 2 units here. And what I've done is, as we've done before, you want to press to the dark side. You want to take it over, and you want to set your seam. You want to push your iron down, and you want to press this over to the dark side. Because that way, when it comes to stitching this unit together, what you can do is this seam goes to that seam just beautifully. It nests right together. So maybe you'll want to put a pin there, and because we've cut it well, remembering your 1/4-inch seam, or if your blocks are turning out a bit small, remember our scant 1/4 inch, just a thread or 2 smaller than your 1/4 inch, stitch along a 1/4 inch seam right along there, and then we will have these 3 4 square units, 4 patch units, nice and with a nice matched up point there. So press to the dark, nest your seams, a nice 1/4 inch seam. Now I have here my 3 ironed and sewn and ironed 4 patch blocks that, oh my phone, that I'll just put to the side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our 2 pieces of 4 7/8 inch squares here, and our 2 pieces of our background, our 2 pieces 4 7/8 inch squares. And this way we're going to be making, as we've done before, we're going to be making our half square triangle units. Now I'm going to take this over to my ironing board, and as you've seen me do, with the wrong sides together, I'm going to just, because they've been cut perfectly, I'm going to iron them in half, and that gets our line for to sew on either side. Now I got a few comments saying that a lot of people, they take a pencil or a marker and they actually draw a line. I've addressed this before, which you can do by all means. They take a pencil or a pen or whatever, and they draw a diagonal line from point to point, and then you layer your fabrics together, and then you sew a 1/4 inch away from that drawn line. And then of course you cut on the drawn line, so obviously you don't see it, and you end up with a half square triangle. You end up with a unit. This is what we want. I don't do that. I find that my folding in half, it gives me a nice crease along here that I can then put pretty side to pretty side and stitch right on that line. And I'll be showing you that on my sewing machine, how I'm going to be doing that. So as you can see, I've taken to my ironing board over here, I've taken my 2 4 7/8 inch squares that match this piece here, and I've ironed them in half. I've pressed them in half, so I have this nice sharp line. I open that up, and that line on my other fabric, pretty side, right sides together. This is the right side, this is the right side, pretty sides. I'm going to line them up, match them up. I'll just put a pin on either side here. And then we're going to be stitching. We're going to be stitching a 1/4 inch on the inside, this way, of this marked line. What we want to end up is, we're going to end up with a 1/4 inch over here and a 1/4 inch over here. And then we're going to cut this unit on that exact fold line. If you've wanted to mark it with a pencil, by all means. This is my 1/4 inch foot. I've learned my lesson. My 1/4 inch foot, I'm going to be stitching that. So this side of my foot, you can measure your stitches. And what I do is I just leave my needle down, I bring it back, and then I'll just put my presser foot down on the other side of that line and stitch my 1/4 inch foot, my 1/4 inch. I'm going to do that with my other one, and then I'll come back and I will show you how I cut them and how we trim them up. So here are my pieces that I've just ironed my fold and I've stitched along, and I'm going to cut these units apart. This is going to be a half square triangle. Now I'm just going to take my ruler and placing it right along that folded line there with my rotary cutter. Be careful not to cut the stitches. I'll just cut these 2 units apart, and I have my perfect half square triangles. Just cut right along that fold line. And I open this, and I open these up, and I get my half square triangles. Again, I'm going to be pressing to the darker side. I'm going to set my seam with my iron, and then I'm going to press up to the dark side. And as we've done before, I'm going to come back and I'm going to trim away. I'm going to trim away these, what are called dog ears. I'm just going to trim them away after I've pressed these open. I'm going to trim them away, and then we can start putting our blocks together. So I've trimmed off my my little dog ears here. We'll get rid of them. And here are our components to our block that we're going to make. And now we can start putting it together. What we want to do is, you know, this is how I always do it. I always get excited. I want to see what my block's going to look like. So what we want to do is we just want to lay it out in the configuration that hopefully it will end up in. Let me just trim that little, let me trim that thread there without the seam allowances. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this here, this unit here, that unit there. And I have a tone-on-tone fabric, as you know. I got to make sure it's right. And then this is an easy block. I was told last week my star was a little bit hard. This is an easy one. Look, 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 and we're done. Well, we're not done. When I did make an error, oh, isn't that pretty? That's lovely. I did sort of make an error before. I was saying we were making 9 patches. The first 2 weren't 9 patches. I don't know what I was talking about, if you've been following along. The first one was like a like a 12 patch. This is a proper 9 patch. My star last week was a 9 patch. And what that means is at the end of the day, before you arrange your blocks, you have 9 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. With our 5 blocks so far, this being number 5, I've only done 2. Last week's and this one. I was all messed up. Anyway, so this is our lovely block. Look at that. So now, again, we've done this a million times. Well, not a million times. But like, there's our block, there's our configuration, and how you're going to do it with your 1/4 inch seam is you're going to come over and you're going to put the pretty side to the pretty side to the pretty side, and you have 1 unit. You're going to continue with all 3 units. And then you're going to come back and then very carefully, you can pin these by all means, pretty side. You're going to stitch down there, and then if you find it tricky, hopefully not, you'll be coming back and you're going to be matching these points here. And since you've sewn them properly, hopefully, I screwed up last week, they will hopefully match really well. And then you'll have, hopefully, at the end of the day, a 12.5 inch block. Hopefully. So anyway, I'm going to go over. I'm going to take one step at a time. There's no rush to do this. As I said, there are people who can chain piece these and then chain piece these. I don't do that. We're making 1 block at a time, and you want to learn and you want to perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to do my first row. That side to there, and continue down. So I've sewn my units together, and you can see the makings of our block right now. And very important, just like we did last week with our star, very important, after you sew your units together, your top unit, you want to press and set the seams and make sure that they're ironed outward. This seam goes this way, this seam goes this way. But the opposite for the center block. These seams go inward. These 2 seams you press into here. This seam down here you press out. That way what happens when we go to stitch our unit together, we match our seams real carefully with this point and that point, and then your seams will they will nest together beautifully. One is going this way, one is going that way. So I'm going to go pin my seams. I'm going to match this point right here, pin that seam to that point there, and then I'm going to stitch along a 1/4 inch as we've done. So I'm going to stitch that unit to that unit, and then I'll come along and stitch this unit up here, matching these seams. And by all means, you can pin at the seam after you've nested it. You can pin at this seam after you've nested this little triangle there, and hopefully you'll have gotten your points nice, and your block will be done. I mean, this is a simple block now. This is an easy block. As I said, I threw a couple people off last week with that star block. But for you beginners are great. I'm telling you, some of the blocks are awesome. Mine are very, very simple colors, but a lot of you are changing it up. Beautiful, fantastic. So I'm going to go stitch this seam, having pinned and nested my seams here. And then I'll stitch this unit up to here, having pinned and nested my seams, and then my block will be done. Hopefully it will measure 12.5 inches. Fingers crossed. So here's my finished block. I'm really pleased with it. Although I made it and I thought, oh no, that's way off. There's a little bit of, it's a hair off on this point here, but there's also a bit of white from the design. When you have the design here that I didn't, like there's another one right there. So it looks like it's a little bit off. But my seams, I'm really thrilled. My seams match pretty well. That's the design. And just a hair off, that's fine. But look, yeah, it is 12.5 inches. I'm really thrilled with that. Yep, 12.5 inches. Done really well. I've learned my lesson on my new sewing machine. Everybody was saying, oh, when you get a new sewing machine, you have to try the new foot. You have to measure, measure, measure. I didn't, and that's what my problem was last week. But this week's, whatever this block is, has turned out real nice. I've ironed it really nicely. I have to cut off a few of these threads. I've ironed these bits this way and that way and this way, so it lays lovely and flat. So there is my block number 5. Yeah, I'm really, really pleased with it. Oh, as I've mentioned in the beginning, there is a lady who has been giving the complete cutting instructions, and she's including them on my web page. I'm so happy. Debbie Melton, her name is, and I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much, Debbie. I've mentioned it before, that she has actually kindly typed up the cutting instructions for each previous block, like professionally. Like, I'm looking like all professional. Not to me. But anyway, thank you so much. You'll be able to, after this is downloaded, I mean, after I put this up, and I'll try to download the instructions for the actual cutting. But on my video, you'll have seen that this one wasn't too bad, the actual cutting instructions. So, I hope you enjoy this block. We're block number 5. We're just winging along here. It's a pretty block. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy it, folks. Thanks so much for following along with me. I really appreciate it. Okay, bye.